Thank you, Brandon Wilkes, for setting this up here at the Haynes Library. I'm going to jump right into it. My name is Burl Sheldon, and I was a science and math teacher, taught in a couple different communities. Wasn't really a career teacher, but had a fairly good education in the sciences. And basically, my motivation in pursuing this topic is really seeing the level of disease, and seeing folks who, meeting somebody recently who taught home economics and health for several decades, and then realized that much of what they, or a portion of what they had taught was not correct. Meeting people who were in a very serious situation with autoimmune disease. And of course, we know that we have a significant epidemic of diseases of metabolism. And after reading the work, 3 different books by Robert Lustig, MD, and kind of going back and rereading that information again, and then a 3rd time. And I realized I was very motivated to try to make a change in people's lives. And I made a presentation in late November in Tennessee Springs. That was the first time I'd done it. Before I did a slideshow, I had nothing but notes. And then I boiled it down to a 7-minute presentation for a local organization. This is a little bit of an extended version of it, and realizing that if we are going to talk about sugar, we really must talk about carbohydrate in general. So I chose this topic and this title with that in mind, and then kind of filled in the blanks. So the part about sugar comes a little bit later, but let's just jump into it and we'll get going here. I think everybody can hear just fine, and I thank the Haynes Library. If anybody in the Haynes catchment wants to see a program or do a program at the Haynes Library, call the education program or email education@Haynes-Library. And you'll get there, and you'll end up communicating with Brandon Wilkes. All right. Now all we got to do is make this darn thing go. You know what? Okay. Well, I guess that didn't work. It could work soon. There we go. Okay, we're going to first talk about some of the key characters, and every good story needs to start with, I don't want that to be there. Get that out of my face. I want all of that out. Please go away. Brandon, where are you when I need you? There we go. Cancel. I don't want that. Okay. Here's the key characters here. Hopefully it'll just keep working great. And let's go. The eukaryotic cell is what is inside of all of our bodies. And I'm going to stop for just a minute and get our tech person. There's a little bit of a challenge. I'll be right with you. Hey, Brandon.
Oh, yeah, when you touched it, yeah. That's how it goes. That's how it works.
This thing, make this all go away.
Oh, the whites. How'd you do that?
I don't know. Yeah, we're writing. Yeah. See what's this is all about. Okay. Clear it all. Cancel. You want to cancel?
Were you using the remote?
I have no idea.
You don't know.
We have to. What is there?
There you
Cancel. I want that to go away.
This is part of well, hold on. This is part of Zoom.
I got it.
So we're just
Okay.
gonna put them down here.
Here we go.
That's
Hey,
everybody who's watching you. There you go.
there we go. All right, the eukaryotic cell, our bodies are made of these cells that have very specific functions. We have in our cells a system that was set up at least 500 million years ago. So when we talk about time in relationship to our physiology or our health, we have to remember that this isn't about 10 generations or 20 or 40 generations ago. This is about a tremendous long time. All animals use the eukaryotic cell, must have a very high integrity cell membrane, and those cells and membranes serve specific functions. The mitochondria of cells, we're going to talk a bit more about today, and I think I can reduce the size of this a little bit. There we go. Mitochondria is where we produce energy inside of every cell. There might be 10, there might be 100 or more mitochondria. They are where we burn glucose, fat, ketone bodies. And the purpose of all of that is when we are able to have energy for movement, energy for reproduction, energy to keep us warm. And a huge amount of the energy that is consumed by a body in a given day is just about keeping us warm. And all of that energy in any animal is burned as adenosine triphosphate, ATP. In these cells are specialized organelles that are special hazmat containment units, in fact, peroxisomes. Golgi apparatus is like a waste transfer station. And whenever we're talking about proteins of any kind, be they an enzyme or a immune factor or the tissue in a muscle, we're talking about something that was created by ribosomes. And we recently had an experience with ribosomes that had to do with the creation of the COVID-19 vaccine. The pancreas is a key player in this, in that it makes insulin. And a person, I'll tell you a quick story. My father, his stepsister died when she was about 14 years old. This would have been about 1939. And she had juvenile diabetes, and there was none available. There was actually insulin available then, but she didn't get any. And like many people who had what we call juvenile diabetes, she died. Type 2 diabetes is a very different disease. It's when our system of insulin is broken down. And we'll talk more about that in a bit. The pancreas is also making digestive enzymes that are important to us. Okay, the liver is a super important critical organ. We want our liver to be operating perfectly all the time. It's receiving all of the blood that comes from our stomach and intestine. It produces the immune factors that fight off germs. It's producing bile and storing iron. And the carbohydrate energy that we consume, or the protein energy that we convert into carbohydrates, can be converted into glycogen, as can fat. And that glycogen is an animal starch. And we store enough of it, and we fill up our liver, and we can also store glycogen in muscle tissue. And once that is all full up, we start making fat. And that's a big part of our story here. Glucose, if a person were only eating fat or was in ketosis when they had been on an extreme calorie restriction or mimicking starvation like an intermittent fast, and you need glucose because organs like your eyeballs and your blood can only burn glucose. That's all they can use. That fabulous thing called the liver can make glucose in the process called gluconeogenesis. And when you worry about eating cholesterol, remember that 80% of your cholesterol is created in your liver. Okay, let's keep it rolling here. Up we go. Okay, we are omnivores. Humanity is omnivorous, and there's some really remarkable examples of this situation. The Inuit and the Inupiaq people of northern parts of the planet ate a diet that had virtually no fiber in it. Or if it did have fiber in it, it was only during restricted times of the year. Traditional Eskimo people ate a diet that was protein and fat. So there's a paradox about the subject of fiber. in that there are cultures that ate virtually no fiber and did okay, they thrived. Traditional Pacific Rim people ate a very high carbohydrate diet. These are whole foods. And so there we have 2.5 million years of great health. That's humanity. If we even dig into the farthest, earliest Homo or Ardipithecus, we're talking about 4 million years. And as I mentioned, we can stay healthy with whole foods. Glucose is required by some parts of our body, but it can be manufactured through protein metabolism and made in the liver. All right, this comes to a topic we were just talking about, really. Feeding, the hybrid car analogy done by Nina Teschholz, who wrote the Big Fat Surprise, which is an excellent book if you're interested in understanding better the very poor information we've been fed about dietary fat. I suggest you read The Big Fat Lie, and you can find it on eBay pretty cheap. We can feed, that's fueling up our batteries, or we can fast. And when we fast, in other words, we're mimicking starvation, we're going to burn through that animal starch in about a day to two. We're going to enter ketosis, meaning we're going to start burning our fatty substances as fatty acids or ketone bodies. And I've given you a picture there on the right side. Believe it or not, your body can burn acetone. Don't drink it. But acetone is an example of a ketone body. It is a metabolic product of fat. When a fat breaks down and we're going to metabolize it, and it can be metabolized in our brain and all of our tissues of the body, except, to my knowledge, the blood and the eyeballs must have glucose. And then when we're in that phase and prolonged, we're in a protein conservation phase. Our growth hormone increases, okay? By the way, we'll talk a little bit more about this. We never get there because we're always eating. We're always eating. We never go into this starvation, this mimicking of starvation mode in our society, because food is so available. So a little bit more about feeding. Of course, the hormone insulin is involved because we're burning carbs and we may be making new fat and storing carbohydrate energy as glycogen. The hormone leptin is active in the hypothalamus. It's the hormone that says stop eating. So that's called satiety. And it's a really, really important watchword to this whole presentation. If you can be in connection with your satiety, that's a really good thing. That if you feel that I've had enough, it's time to stop eating, and obviously I've not eaten a whole lot more than I should eat, that's a really good sign. If you can't ever get satiety, ask yourself why. We will talk more about that. The hormone ghrelin is the one that says, I'm hungry now, okay? And it turns out that some of our problem deals with the numbing or the oppression of satiety. But a key focus of my presentation is that hormones are in control, it turns out, and all this great literature I've been digesting. Calories are not in control. Calories do not produce body weight nearly as great, to a great extent. The thing to worry about is your hormones, not so much your calories. And we'll talk more about that. Okay. A little bit on the fasting, extended fasting, meaning 24, 48 hours, 32 hours. In other words, something that is really being managed probably with the help of a doctor. Okay. It's not something, you might do it on your own. It's all good. The grocery store is just down the street, so it's not too big of a problem. The growth hormone increases when we mimic starvation. That means we conserve lean muscle. Metabolism increases, so we're burning more calories. We're burning through the glucose. We're burning through the glycogen. We've exhausted all that. Now we're in ketosis and we're starting to burn fat for energy. Satiety, that sense of, I've had enough to eat, is resensitized. And that's the hormone leptin, which is active in the hypothalamus. It's at the base of the brain. And your insulin goes down and keeps going down. That's an interesting one because normal diets, we were just talking about a normal diet, which is a calorie restriction regime. Your insulin goes down, then it plateaus. It goes down for a while, then it plateaus. In a fasting situation, your insulin level keeps going down. And I think that if you were a woolly mammoth hunter and it was a million, well, let's say 75,000 years ago, and you and your friends needed to kill a woolly mammoth today, would you be cold and cranky? And no, you wouldn't be cold and cranky. You'd be in the zone. You said, we're going to kill us a woolly mammoth today. So after initial hardship, the mimicking of starvation, we feel pretty good. That's a really interesting one. And we're not talking about calorie restriction. We're talking about fasting. Let's see, where are we on the time so I can kind of see where I'm at. Making sure I'm moving fast enough here. Good. Okay. A little bit about insulin. It's a remarkable and small protein. That's not very many amino acids. It is only active in your circulatory system for several minutes. When it's persistently high, what in your body causes fat making? Is it calories? No. The job of insulin is to make fat. That's what insulin does. And it's what causes fat to be deposited. It's also, if we drive it down to nothing, it's what causes fat to be lost. That's the theory of intermittent fasting, which I'm not an expert in. I'm not here to talk about intermittent fasting, but it is a subject right now that's interesting in this topic. So there's different ways of staying out of the scientific literature and staying out of the scientific language. I thought of insulin being like a fireman measuring and shoveling in the coal, or in this case, the glucose. We could also think of it as an usher that brings the glucose to the doorway that enters the cell, or a manager, a glucose manager. So all of those are metaphors for how insulin manages the sugar glucose, getting it into the cells where it can be burned. And it's primarily being burned in the presence of oxygen, okay? Oxidative phosphorylation is the burning of glucose in the presence of oxygen. That's where 90% of your and my energy come from. We can also burn glucose through an anaerobic pathway that's very inefficient. And we'll talk about that in the context of fiber, because the bacteria in your colon are chewing up and consuming fiber with a very inefficient form of metabolism known as fermentation. So it turns out that you can trick insulin. You can trick the pancreas, which makes insulin. I'm going to kind of repeat the role of insulin here. It's to regulate glucose and induce glycogen and fat storage. So how do you trick the pancreas? Okay. It turns out there's this thing called the cephalic effect, cephalic meaning the head. And when sweet hits your lips, or starch hits your lips, enters your mouth, we start producing insulin. Okay. It's not the only time we produce insulin. We will have that insulin signal reinforced in the stomach and perhaps in other places. But the artificial sweeteners induce the secretion of insulin, but the artificial sweetener cannot be acted upon by insulin. The same is for fructose. Insulin is about glucose regulation and energy storage, not fructose storage, okay? So the fructose that's in your OJ in the morning, which most people think of as the good sugar, which is something I want to disabuse you of in this presentation. The fructose in the morning OJ is inducing an insulin response that is unrequited. The insulin is not put to good use in that case. So that's an example. Of course, we're going to get to sucrose, which is half fructose and half glucose. I'll talk about that in just a minute. But there is this trick that is possible, and that's a really important reason why we want to, one of the backstory of this presentation, or the take-home message, is that keeping our insulin levels low, it turns out, or lower, and that's a relative term, turns out to be good for our health. Keeping our insulin level and our spikes of insulin down, moderate, is a very good thing for our overall health. We'll talk more about it. Okay. We talked about some very, very deep time. We talked about 500 million years, or who knows how long the eukaryotic cell has been around. This very, very specialized cell that has a gazillion different applications depending on its genetic code and all of these other things. But our history of sugar is really one of just a couple hundred years, which from the standpoint of evolution is nothing. Okay, so we virtually had no sugar, and I say 2.5 million. We're talking about the genus Homo. You know, the genus Homo here on planet Earth, there might have been, you know, half a dozen or more different species of a Homo in the genus Homo. Okay, 13th century England, extremely rare. Of course, none of it came from the West Indies or the New World. It would have come from India, or originally cane sugar, we believe, came from Papua New Guinea, was where it originated. Queen Elizabeth dies corpulent and toothless. And 1710, about 4 pounds. In 1999, the United States consumed on average 150 pounds per year. And that's a 37-fold increase in the duration of the settlement and really the population growth of North America. We're currently consuming half of what we consumed in 1999, which is a really good thing. Sugar consumption has come down, okay? So let's look at what it means to be sugar from the context of our language, okay? Our language, I'm gonna adjust the screen a little bit. There we go, I like that better. These are a gazillion different ways we describe sugar. It's a marketing ploy. They got to call it something. It's a way of covering up what it is. And, you know, I'm sure there's some science to it too, you know, so there's all these different kinds, you know, and some are gooder and badder and who knows all. We're only going to really talk about 2 during the presentation here. So there's a lot of different things on the labels of products. And one good way to think about this is if something has more than 3 ingredients, you might want to think about buying a different product. Okay. And it's ubiquitous in processed food, and even food that's not sweet, so to speak. So there's sweet foods we expect it to be an apple pie. I was at somebody's house the other day and I got pie and ice cream. It sure felt good. And then there's other examples, you know, Jiffy peanut butter, all the various spreadables, the friends of ours that just cannot eat those venison ribs without a bottle of barbecue sauce, you know, tremendous amount of sugar, ketchup, all those kinds of things, all these different things that are sources of sugar in, and it turns out there's about 2/3 of the food products that we purchase in a grocery store today have added sugar. One of the really, really critical pieces of American history happened in 1980. We tend to demonize high fructose corn sweetener, which really captured the sugar market in 1978. That's when it really took off and broke the cane sugar monopoly, so to speak. Beet sugar was also real big coming on. And but we got some bad science. There was some bad science and some bad conclusions out of the 1950s. In 1961, the American Heart Association said that we've got to drop the saturated fat. That's what's causing the heart disease. And they prevailed. The guy who was the theoretical brain trust ends up on the cover of Time magazine in 1961. In 1980, we demonized saturated fat through the dietary guidelines of the USDA. And look what happened. We replaced the sugar, we replaced the fat with sugar. And here's a graph taken from the National Institute of Diabetes and Digestive and Kidney Disease. 1980 is the year when we took the fat out of processed food. 1999 is the peak of our sugar consumption. 1978 was when high fructose corn sweetener went on the market. And it's a pretty obvious graph. I don't need to spend a lot of time on it. The tragedy of this situation, the profound expense and cost and tragic results of this piece of American dietary advice and guidance, I don't think can be calculated. I don't think you could really put a number on it. It's just too astronomical. Yeah. So what is the let's look at, and I'm really relying heavily on the fine science and writing of a doctor who treats obesity and diabetes at Toronto. His name is Jason Fung. Oops. His name is Jason Fung. You'll see his name again and again. I just got him as Jason here on this slide. There's a few typos here. Does dietary saturated fat cause heart disease? We're talking about carbohydrates, but there's no way to escape the connection here. So we'll just spend a moment on this. There are no links in these studies, major health studies involving a lot of people in long periods of time. We're not talking about snapshots. We're talking about longitudinal studies of many years. No links to heart disease here. Does dietary fiber protect against diabetes? Yes, it does. And the combination, this is one of Jason's primary concerns, is that the combination of a high carbohydrate diet and low fiber is deadly. And that's the results of a number of studies that show the worst outcomes are when people are eating a high carbohydrate diet. This is sort of the McDonald's. This is on the McDonald's program, a combination of high carbs, low fiber. Okay, we're really only dealing with two sugars in the remainder of our presentation here. One of them, glucose, is burned in every cell in the body. The glucose fuels your brain most of the time. Ketones can also fuel the brain, which are those metabolic products of fat. And for fructose, we evolved to handle only small quantities of this unusual 5-carbon sugar. And our body obviously created a separate metabolic pathway for fructose because it is different, and it is all metabolized in our liver. And to keep it simple, generally, it's an important guideline too in thinking about sugar. All added sugar, and there are exceptions. Agave is mostly fructose, for example. There's this thing called monk fruit. I don't really understand what it is. But the main thing to remember, if you got maple syrup or high fructose corn sweetener or table sugar or molasses, et cetera, and so forth, it's half glucose and half fructose. Plain and simple. So as we progress through the rest of our slideshow, there's part 2 is about fiber, starches, and then how sugar promotes disease. And fibers and starches are all composed of sugars, individuals, chains, or chains that are lined up as a sheet. Okay. And those sugars, those individual sugars, are monosaccharides. Okay. Dietary fiber, part 2. And homeostasis is an important watchword for all aspects of health I just had a conversation about how our body does not want to lose weight. Once you have acquired weight, fat, whatever, muscle, doesn't want to lose it. It wants to hang on to it. Your body wants to stay at approximately 98.6 degrees, and it will regulate the consumption of fuel up and down to maintain that. If you go into a warm room, you start burning less energy. You go outside into the cold, you start burning more. Homeostasis is a key function in our intestine and in the relationship between our microbiotic world in our lower and small intestine and colon and the rest of us. So that's a kind of a cool idea. The more we foster homeostasis, the longer, healthier, and happier our lives will be. So very quickly, fiber is what sails on through to your colon. Short chains of sugar molecules that cannot be digested by your chemistry and your digestive system. Okay, so looking at some fiber colon nuance here, another way to call that in a scientific way is, and you see it occasionally, oligosaccharides, meaning a few sugars. Okay, well, let's talk about.
Excuse me. I think
Yes.
we're on the wrong screen on the Zoom. We're on page 14.
Really? It's
I'm-
not advancing.
I'm at home, we're only on page 14.
Oh, I'll be. Okay, are you seeing it change now?
Yeah, it's starting to change now.
Okay, well, I'm gonna blow you away because that's 14 right now.
Okay, we're on 15 right now.
Did you see that graph before?
No, this US obesity rates children.
Yeah.
Excuse me, Burl, this is Lori Dudurian speaking. My Zoom screen has been right with you.
Thank you, Lori.
Yes,
Okay, so
mine-
you've seen this graph and you've seen this screen, right, Lori?
yes, I have.
Okay, we're gonna keep on rolling then. We're just gonna blow right through it. Thank you, Lori, for straightening me out. I have to keep moving.
Okay,
Okay, undigested fiber is between 3 to 10 linked sugar molecules. Okay, your fiber is digested by anaerobic fermentation. It's a very inefficient form of metabolism. It occurs without oxygen, anaerobic. Our lower intestine, our colon, is an amazing ecosystem where there are stem cells. Your body has stem cells in its bone marrow, but it also has stem cells in the colon, and it's extremely energetic. Get this thing out of here. Okay, this thing came on again. And yeah, go get him here. Whatever this annotation thing is. I'm gonna just.
And again, Burl, on
Hi.
Zoom, everything looks fine.
Good, I have this weird feature that is, I don't understand that. I want our awesome tech dude make that go away.
You should keep doing that.
I don't know.
What are you hitting?
I don't know.
You know, you can just tap this thing to change the.
Well, look what happens. I tap.
Oh, yeah, now you
Oh,
have
yeah.
this up. I don't know how you managed to do.
Folder, you hit a folder. And then you cancel. There we go. We'll do that. Now let's try.
Okay,
it.
yeah,
Okay.
you can just tap this thing. to
Okay,
move
so
the
it's
slide.
just this area, your colon has, thank you, Brandon.
No
Let's hang with me for just a second. Has these areas that are stem cell rich. We're producing stem cells, this extremely energetic part of your body that's burning through cells. They only last about 5 days. You're turning this over. It's an extremely energetic aspect of your physiology. And this whole fiber has a role, longer fiber, i.e. not very long, just 3 to 10 linked sugar molecules, has a very important health role for us. And here we try to explain that. So we've got this amazing GI system, this ecosystem. It's being tied together with fiber and the nutritional aspects that are produced from anaerobic fermentation. When we are absent fiber, and the caveat would be those Inuit Eskimo people who eat virtually no fiber, okay? In our dietary world where we're consuming carbohydrate, buddy, you better have some fiber in there. And so vegetables, legumes, there's a range. We're going to talk about that a little bit, but a diet that is shy of fiber is correlated in animal studies with anxiety and depression, bipolar disorder, and of course, we're going to talk about those numerous diseases coming right up. Tight junctions is a reference to our next few slides here. We'll talk more about that. The fueling of neurotransmitter production via the GI tract and the GI tract cells is an extremely important aspect of the role of fiber and a healthy GI tract. Serotonin is what makes us happy. It's the feeling of happiness. 95% of our serotonin is in the intestine. Dopamine is our reward signal. gamma aminobutyric acid is a calming neurotransmitter. Bacteria, plants, animals, all use these same neurotransmitters. So it's a marvelous example of a very useful tool that's become universally accepted in the world of all organisms. Okay. There's a metaphor, and this is the metaphor. That's the metaphor for tight junctions. Your epithelial cells with tight junctions, your epithelial cells with a leaky junctions, okay? You want your epithelial cells in your colon and lower small intestine, all of your intestine, to be tight. And if you don't have them tight, things leak through into your circulatory system. So what's now called leaky gut is a promoter of chronic inflammation. And chronic inflammation may really be the elephant in the room for a lot of dysregulation and disease illness generally. There are dozens of conditions that are caused or correlated with this. And as I mentioned before, anxiety and depression are among them. So absent that fiber, okay, again, the immune response is not subtle. We just had an experience with that. The cytokine storm that kills people in the hospital who have pre-existing conditions during COVID-19. That cytokine storm is an example of the immune response lacking subtlety, okay? But that's your immune system. Once you trigger the endocrine system, that's your hypothalamus, your adrenal and pituitary system. Now you're in a stress hormone environment that is compounded. That comes after the immune response, okay? So keeping these conditions at bay is extremely important. Robert Lustig, excess of sugar, lack of fiber, and also the belief that omega-6 oils are really contributors. So that's your Wesson oil. You want to get the Wesson oil out of your diet. You want to get the polyunsaturated corn oil, soybean oil, canola oil, which are high in omega-6, out of your diet. That's what would be the recommendation of both Anderson, Cran, and Denon in the Psychobiotic Revolution, and Robert Lustig, but both would agree with that. All right, these amazing little critters that are down there are burning through this fiber, and they're using fermentation, and they're producing a waste product. The short chain fatty acids that they produce are eaten by the colon itself. The colon itself is consuming these short chain fatty acids as food. So it's an extremely important aspect of fiber metabolism. It's an extremely important aspect of your colon and preventing leaky gut. I got to keep moving. There's really an amazing aspect of it. I'm gonna just leave it. No, I'm gonna keep it wider. Butyrate is one of those short chain fatty acids. It's a function of our growth and brain health. It is able to cross between the blood and the brain, and it's shown to be an antidepressant. So, okay, if I keep rolling here, I'm gonna run out of go over, which would be terrible. Okay. We are really, one of the things that I've learned here through this project is to focus on brown starch. Legumes are a really good source of it, and to use whole wheat forms of, or whole grain forms of white starch. I would eat 2 potatoes if I could. I've been a very lusty eater throughout my life, but the starches that are fast are branched and bushy, and so there's all these ends that the enzymes can become attached to and can consume very quickly. Lowering this insulin response is important, and the legumes provide a linear structure that has a lower insulin response. Okay? Now we're going to talk about this little piece that is just fascinating here, and this deals with our insulin response and glucose. And added sugar is 50% glucose, so of course it has a relatively high insulin response. White starch is 100% glucose, pretty much as would be a whole wheat bread. A whole grain bread is still a white starch, but it's also got bran and the germ in it, so it has less of a spike in terms of glucose and less of a spike in terms of insulin. And we talked about the cephalic effect, that fructose is not glucose. Okay, it does have a glycemic index of 15. We'll talk about what that means, but it really doesn't interact with the insulin, despite the fact that it produces an insulin response. Artificial sweeteners also. Then down at the bottom, oil produces no glucose spike, of course, and no insulin spike. And protein is a source of glucose and is a source of a moderate spike. Okay. Slow carbs are really an important aspect of a lowering insulin. Lowering insulin is an important part of this presentation, the purpose of this presentation. If we lower insulin, we are likely to be keeping insulin relatively low as a value health-wise. So legumes are a good source of that. Resistant starches, some of them will pass through to the colon, meaning they are non-soluble in a sense. So where is the line between resistant starch and insolubility? I can't say, but things like legumes, it turns out, are pretty valuable in this way. And these are linear sugar chains, okay? Now, there's 2 different ways to talk about the relative rapid response of a food in your body. One is in terms of glucose, there's a rating system of glycemic index, and then there's a more modern approach that's glycemic load. Glycemic index has been around for about 40 years. Glycemic load has been around, well, less than that. And it's a more reliable way to measure. So we're talking about a range of from basically 0 to 20 and above in one case in the glycemic load. And in the case of glycemic index, low is from 0 to 5, medium is 56 to 69, high 69 to 100. So if you're interested in this, you go online and do a quick search of glycemic load of foods, and you'll get a list of 50 foods and their glycemic index or the glycemic load, etc. I love what the Harvard Heart Letter has to say. Diets with a higher glycemic index and load are associated with higher risk of cardiovascular disease and death. And that means if we keep our glycemic load low, or glycemic index low, and choose foods that have lower index and load. Again, these are two different ways to say the same thing. I'm not quite done with this subject, but this is a pretty important aspect of nutrition. Given the fact that we are flooded with so much sugar and relatively fast-acting carbs, it's worth looking at this, okay? Glycemic index of 100 is glucose. Glucose has a glycemic index of 100, okay? A baked potato has a glycemic index of 93. It has very little resistant starch. It's the branched type of starch. White bread, also the branched type of starch that is consumed by the enzymes very quickly. Very little resistant starch. And then in the case of the legumes at the bottom, only a couple percent of increase in the resistant starch changes the glycemic properties of the food considerably. A little bit of resistant starch really helps the glycemic properties of food, improves their healthiness. Okay, and now we're looking at the other way of measuring this. This is a more consistent rating method for comparing the glucose response of foods. And the high side is 20 and above for glycemic load. And an example, you know, your 60 million servings a day or boxes a day of Honey Nut Cheerios, processed breakfast cereals, extremely high glycemic load and glycemic index. White rice, white flour, white potatoes are high foods in their glycemic load. Down on the far side, we see nuts, which are high in fat, carrots, leafy greens, apples, oranges. Yeah, so that's an interesting screen there. This stuff is available with a quick internet search. You can find it all over the place, okay? But if you've never heard of it, it's worth taking a look at it and understanding. Now we're looking at comparing the two, load and index together. With the glycemic index, kale, hey, hardly any glycemic load, and of course, a very low glycemic index as well. Boiling a potato burns away a bunch of the soluble starch, the white starch. And so you get a better, more balanced product when you boil a potato as compared to baking a potato. Okay, I'm going to just keep moving. So there we have some stuff from both glycemic index and load, and you can kind of better understand the starches. And by the way, if anybody wants me to just simply send them this thing as an email, I will be glad to do that. If I sent you an email, you could send me an email back and we'll get there. We're getting into the part of the program about the problem now. And it's a big problem. The United States Defense Department has a budget of 0.8 trillion. And so this is what we're spending on the treatment of metabolic diseases every year. That does not include the opportunity costs, another way of calling that broken dreams. So we might be actually spending almost double that number on this problem every year. So I'm going to move through this quickly. We've cut our sugar consumption in half. 17 teaspoons a day, all of it is about the same, 50-50. It's not literally true, but it is a good way to think about sugar. 50-50 between fructose and glucose. Okay. These are the pathways that damage us. Glycation is browning, just like gravy and pan. That same process. Oxidative stress is what happens when we put hydrogen peroxide on a cut. That is exactly the same thing. Free radicals, also called radical oxygen species. Insulin resistance is a glucose train wreck, and that's a nice way to think of it. It is the excessive insulin resistance is diabetes. That's what diabetes is. It causes elevation of blood sugar, which promotes new fat making. Thus, diabetes and obesity in a very fundamental physiological way are the same disease. There are different stages of that disease, but there are physicians that are treating this that now refer to it as diabesity. The boiler rooms of cells are the mitochondria. When we damage them, we're in serious trouble. Membrane integrity is extremely important, that things can come and go from cells freely. The elasticity and the normal function of cells is critical. Chronic systematic inflammation we talked about. When we have a bunch of oxidative stress inside of a cell, we get genes that are mutated. And I think if you're interested in reading about cancer from the standpoint of metabolic disease, there's a book called The Metabolic Approach to Cancer. That's a fascinating read. Cancer is a metabolic disease, one that is also involved with cellular mutation. Okay. Glycation is a fundamental process of aging. Wrinkles on your skin is an example of glycation. It's caramelizing. It's the same thing. A protein combines with a fat or a sugar, rather. Sugars, fats, and proteins combining together, getting gummy. If you were to slice open a cadaver, let's say a person died, they gave their body to science, they're 90 years old, you slice that person's body open, and the sternum of that cadaver is brown. And that is because they have been browning their entire life. Fructose, and it drives glycation because of its different structure about 7 times faster than glucose. All of that is going on in the liver because that's the only place that fructose is metabolized. So we get a higher rate of glycation and thus a higher rate of aging as a result of eating more sugar. Oxidative stress, I mentioned, is like hydrogen peroxide. It's produced in metabolism, it's produced in glycation. We have fabulous organelles, the peroxisomes, that manage it. It's the hazmat team. But when it's out of control, free radicals end up spilling out of the mitochondria, spilling out of the areas of the cell that are metabolizing by anaerobic fermentation as well. And so these excess free radicals are etching the cell walls. That is the basis for which we have arterial sclerosis. We used to believe that arterial sclerosis was cholesterol buildup. Now we realize that it's this etching of the cell wall that is then proceeds to deposit tissues and plaques that end up plugging up our arteries. So oxidative stress is a really big deal. It's why we want to limit the consumption of sucrose and fructose. It's one of the really good reasons to reduce the amount of sugar that you're consuming. In the case of the human body, that for 2.4 million years or 2.5 million years had no added sugar. Now it's got a ton, and it turns out that the fructose side of it, the 50% that's fructose, is all being consumed and metabolized in the liver. And so there's a tremendous load of oxidative free radicals acting in the liver as a result of that. All right. Come on, give me a break. There we go. I can't spell habitual. This is really the elephant in the room. There's a gazillion reasons why people get sick. But here's one for you that I'll rattle through, and we can see we have 2 number 7s there. It's excellent. Habitual sugar and refined consumption of sugar. Insulin is spiking, never coming down. We're snacking, never fasting. And we become in hyperinsulinemia, persistently elevated insulin. Just like heroin, just like cocaine, our cells can develop a tolerance to a chemical, and insulin is a perfect example. Once we become tolerant, we develop a resistance to the action of insulin. which is a very dangerous situation. Suppression of satiety, the natural ability to say, I'm full now. The hormone insulin has been disabled. So the suppression of satiety means that hunger is unchained. And the hormone ghrelin is now in control, ruling over our dietary choices. And I think a key thing here is that, again, hormones are in control of our hunger. Hormones are in control of our weight gain. That's what insulin does. Insulin is the fat-making hormone. Ultimately, we have a situation where we've reduced new fat making, we have elevated triglycerides and LDL cholesterol. So that's a biggie. And here is sort of a cycle from the top going around in the clockwise way. Insulin response from sugar, constant snacking, persistently elevated insulin. We've now numbed our satiety. We are now making new fat, and we have all this radical oxygen species, the free radicals, etc., excessive glycation. We're damaging the cells. And this is a cycle that's going on and on and on and on continuously. So there again, I emphasize that hormones are driving weight gain or loss, not calories and not dietary fat. There is zero evidence that dietary fat causes weight gain. I think. I mean, maybe if a doctor were here, he'd be raising his hand and calling me out. I'm good with that. I don't see it. And I love Jason Fung's comment. I can make anyone gain weight. All I need to do is give them insulin. And here's a guy who treats diabetics, and he's sick of it. He's sick of giving people insulin. He realizes that it is not helping anybody. And we've been giving people insulin since the early 20s for the treatment of diabetes. We knew that sugar, we called it saccharin disease back in the 1800s. We knew there were examples of it. Benjamin Franklin probably had insulin resistance. He had terrible gout. And maybe it was from booze, but it was probably from sugar. I have no idea. But there's a gazillion different diseases that are related to this. And there's the old Mr. Mitochondria, and I'm already probably hitting the wall right now. It's 8 o'clock. The mitochondrial damage is really the train wreck, because these are these magnificent organelles that live inside of our cells. There can be hundreds in every cell. They're kind of shaped like a bacteria, and it's as if they were many, many millions of years ago. This is the disease caused by insulin resistance. The glucose can't enter the cells of the mitochondria. The membranes are damaged. We have reduced cellular function, and in a sense, a glucose train wreck. And that's as nice as I can make it. Metabolic syndrome, we hear about that. What does it mean? Okay. It's the period where we're getting sick with diabetes, liver disease, heart disease. And what's going up? Our insulin resistance, blood pressure, bad cholesterol. That's the small, dense LDL. The inflammatory markers, meaning we may have leaky gut as a result of this dietary choice. And then what's coming down, I see circulating triglycerides, hunger, and belt size. Weight gain and belt size is a symptom of the disease. The disease is already there. The insulin resistance is already there. That is this metabolic theory, a hormonal theory of obesity. That's a hormonal theory of obesity. The insulin resistance is already there. We're starving for energy. The cells are starving for energy, while at the same time, we're making new fat. I think of the last thing here, this business of satiety, what's coming down. We are insatiable. Our satiety, we don't have the sense of, I'm full now. And if you feel that way, if you're never feeling satiety, ask yourself why. this is where we're at from a national standpoint. 40% obese, 100 million people are pre-diabetic, renal disease, a third of the US population at risk. 20% of deaths are due to heart disease. 1 in 6 deaths are due to cancer. And I really believe, I want to pat my wife here on the head and give her the kudo, because she's been such a driving force in my understanding nutrition. And the foods that we choose, the whole foods that we choose, are the whole foods that our deep ancestors, they were the only foods that were around. And at that time, and that's really a source. I want to blow through that. I just got to keep moving here. Fructose, the ugly. Here we go. Nice fatty liver for you there. Fructose is metabolized in a 5-pound organ. Okay. Here I am, I weigh 185 pounds. There's probably 140 pounds of meat on me. Not that much. 120. So there's 120 pounds of me that's going to metabolize the sucrose that I eat. Majority of that is going to be burning glucose. Glucose is burned in every cell in the body. The half of the sugar that I eat that is fructose is going through my 5-pound liver. And we're generating more fat, twice the fat production from fructose than glucose. I know what to do now. There. Great. We're creating more glycation. We're creating more free radicals. We're directly driving insulin resistance in the liver as a result of fructose. And yeah. Getting there, learning. Jason Fung calls fructose a guided missile on the liver. Fructose is half the added sugar. I'm repeating myself here. Elevated triglycerides mean that the liver has insulin resistance and it needs more insulin in the pressing on it to keep the triglycerides bottled up in the liver. It actually has a turgor pressure, and more insulin is required to keep the fat inside the liver. And so this vicious cycle, and I think I've read it in several different places. Fruit juice has been given a golden halo that it does not deserve. Fruit juice is, if you would eat 4 oranges at a sitting, well, you are an amazing human being. I'm going to eat 1 orange at a sitting. It's going to be consumed with all of the fiber. That's how an orange was made to be eaten. Same with an apple. Junk the juicer, and I've read that in several different pieces, because all of that fructose is going to be metabolized by your liver, and it lacks the fiber. We did it. Frugility is the word, not fragility. This is a beautiful idea. Consumerism has worked very hard with the help of popular psychology to convince people that indulgence is good for you, whereas frugality is self-oppressive. And here on Main Street, in your town on Main Street, the grocery store has products for sale. About 2/3 of them contain added sugar. And all of Robert Lustig's work is fabulous. His book, Metabolical, is very, very worthwhile to own, read, and reread. And that's been an important reference for me. He has a mantra. It is protect the liver, feed the gut. And if you go on a YouTube Easter egg hunt, look for Robert Lustig, April 2022, doing a special seminar to the faculty of the Department of Agriculture for the University of Manitoba. It's the most recent presentation of his that I've seen. And it's about an hour and it covers a considerable amount of what I've talked about here, only he delves into the physiology for about 15 minutes. So you're going to get a big old dose of science and a lot of very technical terms along with it. But Robert Lustig is this person who for 25 years was treating obese children in urban San Francisco. He was a bench lab scientist, I believe, doing endocrine research, understanding the complexity of liver's metabolism with fructose, I think was part of his work, but really crying out, seeing the disease of obesity and diabetes, seeing its links to added sugar, and in particular, the role of fructose in that problem. So I have two different pieces here that are about this. I can, again, somebody has received my email. You send me back an email. I'll send you this whole presentation. You can have it and it could be yours. So all of these references are in that. It could be yours. We don't have to slow down here. Okay. This is the second little group, writers and sources. And then the online resources. I think of the best books to read on this subject. The Psychobiotic Revolution is just absolutely rock solid. It's published by the National Geographic. It covers the new science of the microbiome in a beautiful manner. It's published in 2017. Metabolical is great, and the works of Jason Fung are absolutely incredible. He's written two books, one about obesity and the other about diabetes. Robert Lustig I've mentioned. That's the same reading list. And there, we're done. Thank you. And if people have questions, you're welcome to ask them. And I guess we have a chat mechanism. And we'll see what we got. If you want to type something into chat and you have a question, we could answer a question. So, there it is.
Good. Very good.
Thank you.
I appreciate it.
All right. Hey, all right.
Hey, Burl, I got a question. This is Darren.
Hi, Darren.
Hey, hey, thanks for that awesome bunch of information. Great stuff. Looking forward to checking out some more of the resources. I've already gotten Metabolical, as I think, as you knew, I found that on the Kindle. But I was wondering, with a lot of this juicing that goes on, I think folks, sometimes will juice the whole thing. And so I assume you're talking about don't juice if you're going to be pulling out, all those fibers and such.
Well, I think that I want to say that they're looking at this as a juicer is a metal, high RPM spinning metal cutter that completely pulverizes the fiber.
Oh,
So the strong component of fiber as multiple strands of larger pieces of molecular material is lost.
like
So
the stuff that gets caught between our teeth.
yeah, we were given teeth. We weren't given a blender for a mouth. And so it's like that. But he's actually saying that the fibrous components that we have just pulverized in a juicer are not the same as the fibrous components that we just eat when we eat the whole fruit. But I think a core point of the problem of juicing is that you wouldn't eat 3 oranges at a sitting, but you can sure do it. If you have a 12-ounce OJ, you're eating 3 oranges.
Right.
So
Just
you're
on
getting
volume.
a large hit of fructose with that too.
And then there is also, I suspect there's a lot of bypassing the enzymes and stuff that are, in your mouth as you go along the way. I don't know if that plays in when we're just chugging it down.
maybe so. I mean, in the case of fructose, remember that. I don't know that there's any, I assume there's some enzyme, but you're getting an insulin response, you know, keeping the insulin response low is a goal, and I think it generally should be. You get an insulin response from fruit juice, even though there's no glucose or very little glucose in fruit juice. So Penny James has got a question. Give a summary of how to eat. I don't know. You know, I want to point out that the Tlingit people here in Haines, they had a pretty high fat, high protein diet. They certainly had a good fiber component. We turn the lights off here. I'm still here though. They certainly had a good fiber component, but they had a great source of omega-3 fatty acids. And I kind of wondered with the Eskimo people, they had marine fatty acids. Marine fatty acids are omega-3 long chain fatty acids, which seem to be it may be a magic bullet. It may be the magic bullet. And when the Tlingit people in 1892, they saw the writing on the walls, the armed men from Klukwan attacked the fish trap at Pyramid Harbor. You know, they were eating the Boston food. They were beginning to have the symptoms, the weight gain, etc. I'm sure. So how to eat, Penny? I think you know how to eat, and I'll leave it there. There are benefits to blending and eating easily digestible foods while on liver and kidney cleanses. Thank you, Rob Bishop and Pam. Jenny Johnson from Sitka, thank you very much. See if we have.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yeah.
This
I
is
can.
Angie. This is Angie from Juna. I just want
Hi,
to thank
Angie.
you so much for presenting this valuable information. There's a lot of valuable knowledge that I would like to follow up, but I wanted to ask or comment about the sugar alcohols that are becoming very common with ketogenic diet. So not that the ketogenic diet is trending, you know, we're just substituting the sugar with these sugar alcohols, erythritol being the most common one. And the studies are finding that erythritol causes heart disease and stroke in people, but it's like hidden now in almost a lot of drinks and a lot of products. So yeah, I'm wondering if you have any opinion on sugar alcohols, and I just wanted to get the point out there.
I really don't. I don't know enough about. I don't have any knowledge to really about that. I'm really not familiar with that. Penny, yeah, sugar in fruit is poison. Fiber in fruit is the antidote. But I want to point out there that if we eat whole fruit, it's a low glycemic index food. It's a good source of fiber, and I'm not pushing anybody away from eating whole food of any kind. And to say that fruit is bad would be a mistaken appreciation of what I said here this evening. I did say that consuming fruit juice on a habitual routine basis is probably, there's better things that you could eat. And I think of one of the things, if you go to the deli, what do? Do I buy the muffin or do I buy the Spanica pita? You know, something that's got a bunch of fiber in it, it's more of a savory food. That is a better choice than the muffin or the donut. Let's see. I've got somebody here who's asking, Rob, there are benefits to blending and eating easily digestible foods while on liver and kidney cleansing. Okay, that's not a question. Thank you so much. Thank you, Burl. Okay. I think we're good then. Donna Ray, Faulkner, thank you. This was great. We like Dr. Fung too. Okay, we also like Dr. William Lee, who wrote Eat to Beat Disease. Okay. Sugar is a sugar is a sugar. Okay, I think we're good. Everybody, well, thank you very much. I'm gonna go ahead and sign off unless there's any more. What?
One
One
more.
more, yeah. Okay. Andy Story. All right, Andy Story, thank you very much for taking time to take this in. I appreciate your participation very much.
Thank you.
All right.
Yeah.
Hey, everybody, one more thing before you go. Donna Ray and I are going to be talking at the Master Gardeners class, and I think it's a conference in Anchorage about Korean natural farming. And we think it's a really good thing that everyone should learn. So we want the 100 monkey rule.
Okay,
So everyone should know this. And it's happening early in April. We'll
all
talk to you-
right.
Thank you.
Where can
MasterCard,
I find more information? Thank you.
Master Gardener, Anchorage,
Alaska.
Alaska
Master Gardeners.
Conference.
Okay, thank you.
thank
It'll
you
be-
very much. And
Yep.
it's great. All right, I'm gonna sign off.
Thank
We're
you.
good to go. Thanks very much. Stop here. Isn't Mardell.